On today's episode, we're talking about the top 4 tips that you need to know when importing images into Adobe Lightroom Classic. Hello, and welcome to episode 56 of Photo Kitchen. I am your humble host, MD Welch, and today we're talking importing images inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. Now, importing images into Lightroom Classic can be a little intimidating for the first-time user or even someone who's been using Lightroom Classic for a while and still isn't completely comfortable with all of these options. So I'm going to give you the top 4 things that you need to know to make the import process easier. So the first thing I want to point out is that you can import images into Lightroom Classic a few different ways. And this isn't even one of the tips. This is just a little bit of bonus information. If you're in the library module, which is up here in the upper right-hand corner, you will have access to the import button in the bottom left-hand corner. But you can always get to import photos and video by going up to the menu bar, File, and then import photos and video. So if you're in a different module and you didn't want to go back to the library module, you could do that. And there's even a keyboard shortcut for that. Also, I already have my camera connected to the computer, but in many cases, when you connect your camera or card reader, the import window will automatically open for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click import photos and video, and this will open up the import window. Now, I will automatically start building some thumbnails here, and that's not nearly that big of a deal because the first thing I'm going to talk about, or the first tip, is this little option bar in the upper middle part of the screen where it starts with copy as DNG, copy, then move, and then add. The good news is that when you're importing from a camera or a card reader, 2 of these options, both add and move, are not available to you because Adobe wants you to copy the images from the camera card or the camera onto your computer. So you only have copy or copy as DNG available. So my first tip here is what to choose, copy or copy as DNG. And I'm going to tell you from years of experience that you want to use copy. Adobe's been talking about DNG files for a very, very long time. This is a generic camera RAW file that Adobe will convert your camera-specific RAW file. In my case, I'm shooting Sony here, .arw files. But if you were shooting Nikon, it'd be NEF. If you were shooting Canon, it would be CR2. I forget some of the other camera companies out there, but they all have their specific file suffix and their specific RAW file format for you. When you convert to DNG, the theory is at least that you create a generic file that will be able to be opened and used by any application out there. And I'm here to tell you, and this is the very important thing about this first tip, is that's not necessarily true. I use a lot of different RAW converters out there. One of the other ones that I use is Capture One. And Capture One doesn't like DNG files. That generic thing that Adobe's been telling a lot of us for years doesn't seem to apply to other non-Adobe camera RAW readers out there. Now, there's some pros to still using DNG. You get a smaller file size. It incorporates XMP sidecar files and a lot of that kind of stuff into the file. But honestly, all of those pluses really get outweighed the minute that you might leave Adobe. Now, you might not be leaving Adobe anytime soon or ever, but if you ever do, all of your DNG files will be very hard to use later on in other programs. At least that's my experience. So I choose to use copy over copy as DNG. Also, another thing about this first top tip is that copy as DNG will take almost twice as long to import. So if you're in a rush or you're in a hurry to get images out, you are better off to do copy. It will import faster and you can start to access your files much quicker. You can always convert to DNG later on. So that's another good plus if you want to do that. In fact, most of the options I'm about to show you in the import window can be done well after you import them inside of Lightroom. So you don't have to really worry about these too much, but it's really nice to get it correct from the start. My second top tip is the file handling window, and this is another speed versus import kind of issue. The big thing here is build previews. So the menu breaks down like this. Going from top to bottom, it's basically this ratio of size of preview files versus import speed. At the top, starting with minimal, you will get the smallest preview file, but you will get the images imported the fastest. Down at the bottom, at 1:1, you will get the largest. In fact, you will get a 1:1 ratio or 100% build JPEG preview of your raw file, but it will take much longer to build. So my recommendation is if you're in a hurry, go with minimal. If you're not in a hurry, if you're somebody who plugs in your cards and you walk away from Lightroom Classic for a very long period of time and you're not in a rush to get anything imported, go with 1:1. Again, you could always build these preview files later if you want to. I have embedded in sidecar chosen here because this is an interesting option because it will take the JPEG previews built from your camera, because when you're reviewing your images on your LCD screen, you are actually seeing JPEG previews. It will take those JPEGs and use those as preview files. And sometimes this will give you this happy medium between small files, quick import, or large files, slow import. This is a nice thing to experiment with and see if it actually impacts your workflow. But again, if you're not in a hurry, build them at 1:1, take that extra time. So my third top tip applies to two other panels here, and that's both file renaming and apply during import. Both of these panels, again, can have their options applied well after you've imported your images into Adobe Lightroom Classic. So they're not that big of a deal. I strongly recommend to my students and other photographers I consult with not to rename images on import, mostly because a lot of images that you are going to import are probably going to end up in the trash bin, and why have huge gaps in the number sequence when you're looking at these images? Especially if you're providing these images to clients, they might ask, even if you give them 500 great images, why there's gaps in the number sequences. Did you give them everything? This is an easy way to not only speed up the import process a little bit, but maybe save you a headache when you're dealing with clients. Apply during import is very much in that same idea of saving yourself time. In fact, this could save you even more time because applying development presets and metadata presets on import, if you're in a hurry, could slow down the process even more. Now, if you're not in a hurry, go ahead and apply your import presets, especially metadata, because that's not really that big of an impact onto your file import speed. Development will, but again, if you're not in a hurry, go ahead and apply your presets. But if you are, set them to none, do your work, and then apply the presets only to those images that maybe you need to turn around really quick. My fourth top tip deals with the destination panel, and I'm going to collapse these other panels down to make this easier to see. Destination is probably the one option, even though that if you do get this wrong, you can move the images around. But this is probably the one option in the import process that you want to get right from the start. Where are the files going to be stored? So I have a folder already selected here, and I'm actually going to come up, I'm going to collapse down. I'm importing this to a RAID that I have here, and I'm just going to import these images into a folder called photography. Now, when I select this folder up top in the destination panel, there is an option on how this is going to be stored. Now, if I check into subfolder, I will get a subfolder option here that I can name this. And in this case, this lovely model is named Jessica, right? So I could create a folder automatically called Jessica, and all of the images are going to drop in here. The next option down below is organize. How are these going to be organized? And this is maybe one of my favorite features of Lightroom Classic because not a lot of other raw converting software programs do this. But what you could do is instead of doing by original folders or into one folder, you could select by date. What that will do is then give you a date sequence here that you could choose from. And so it just gives you a little preview of what it's going to look like when you import them. Essentially, every little backslash here will be a new subfolder. If you're photographing the same location, the same objects, the same model, the same client, this can be great because it could break up all of your content automatically into subfolders by year, month, and even day. If you take a look at an example of this that I've done in the past, you can see I have a model's name here, and then I have the years that I photographed the model. And in some cases, I photographed them on multiple days. Now, this is great because it makes it easier to find these files inside of Lightroom without having to do a metadata search. Like if I'm looking for something that I shot in 2015, I don't have to say, go find 2015, or I could start there and call my images down quicker. But also, if I'm not in Lightroom Classic, I could save a lot of time by being able to access these files easily on my hard drive. This is a huge time saver, and it's something I highly recommend, especially to those of you, again, travel photographers, landscape photographers, those of you who are going maybe to the same place multiple times a year or multiple times over your career. This will save you time in the long run when you're trying to find your files inside your catalog of Adobe Lightroom Classic. So my fourth and last tip for importing images into Adobe Lightroom Classic is import all of them. Even though that I have quite a few images here at the beginning of my sequence that I'm playing around with light, I'm testing things, just shooting some blank frames, maybe some flashes didn't fire, I'm getting silhouettes of the model. The fact of the matter is you are not looking at very high quality previews inside of this window. Adobe's just basically generating a quick thing for you to look at. In fact, this is as large as I can make the thumbnails inside of this particular program. So unless you had two radically different subjects that needed to be imported to different destination fields, it's always a good idea just to have check all selected. So all of the images are selected and import everything inside of Adobe Lightroom Classic. And then ascertain whether or not you want to hold on to those files, whether you want to edit them, export them out. You're not going to see whether or not something's in or out of focus inside this window, so why waste your time? The only exception to this is, and it's a bad idea to shoot multiple subjects on a card or multiple days, is if you did in fact do that and you had multiple people here. So in fact, I did do that. I was photographing in the studio all day long. So ironically, this could be an exception to the rule where I would uncheck and check images because I have different people inside of here. But if it's all the same subject, import everything at once, save yourself the time. And once Adobe Lightroom Classic is finished with the import process, you could really then see what images you want to keep and edit and what images need to be thrown away. I hope you enjoyed these top tips. If so, give this video a like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. Also, feel free to leave a comment down below if you have any little import secrets for Adobe Lightroom Classic. As always, I'm your humble host, MD Welch, wishing you all the best from Photo Kitchen. Take care.